Everything started from a simple idea, from a capsule, with determination and persistence. All circumstances were against me. I faced difficult challenges and lost someone dear during that period. This is the story of developing Leaf from scratch, from a simple idea and hope, and how it turned into a success story. This year is different. The graduation year. The year where we prove that we are real game developers, not just students. Everyone is nervous. We had never worked on a large-scale projects before. Some of us had already started working on their games, while I was late. Only 1 week left before the first evaluation. From the beginning, I was realistic. I couldn't make a AAA game. I decided that my game would follow the same gameplay style as Inside and Little Nightmares, because I already had more experience working on platformer games. I studied both games in depth, finished them, and watched all related GDC talks about them. At the same time, I started writing an initial story and decided early on that the game would be called Leaf, and you'll know why. But first I had to present a clear concept and choose the engine that would run the game. Most of my friends choose Unreal Engine, but I decided to be realistic again and carefully assess my situation. My experience was stronger with Unity, and my hardware wasn't sufficient to run Unreal efficiently. I also didn't want to waste time learning a new engine from scratch, so it made sense for me to choose Unity, even with its limitations, because it was the tool I could use at my best. I started a new project, and its foundation was very simple, a capsule, just like most games begin. And very quickly, I discovered the first limitation of URP. It doesn't support volumetrics and many advanced visual features, since it mainly targeted at mid-range devices. I didn't have enough time to build my custom rendering pipeline, just like Playdead developers did. So I switched to HDRP. That's when I was shocked by a complete different world. The amount of settings and features was overwhelming, and everything was different from what I was used to. I took my time trying to understand how it worked, even though time wasn't on my side. Only 1 day remained before first evaluation, and I still didn't have a real prototype, so I had to act fast. I created a simple atmosphere inspired by Inside, and made the capsule move in a basic way. Then I built a very rough blockout for the game, hoping that I wasn't too late. But the truth was clear. I was late. Everyone else was far ahead, and I found myself at the very back. So I had to speed things up. I stopped caring about where I stood compared to others, and focus only on what I could achieve from that moment onward. I need a clear plan, even if it came late. So I start with the basics, the things the player don't see, but that defines the quality of everything that comes after. The input system, the UI, and the custom save system with data encryption. Many games fail at the simplest thing, menu control. For me, it was essential that the menus could be used with any input method, with multiple options, even using mouse buttons only without moving it. I decided that the main menu would be part of the game itself, not a separate screen, a place where the player feels safe, home. That's where the idea of Pause House came from. I wanted a fully seamless gameplay experience, with no interruption, no loading screens, just like watching a movie. Unfortunately, I faced many issues and bugs with Unity input system and TextMesh Pro. But in the end, I had a complete input system that support all devices with full key rebinding. The UI logic was finished exactly as I wanted. I also added support for multiple language with Arabic, even though it's still not fully supported in Unity. I also managed to create a scalable save system that supports many features. And without realizing it, a full month has passed, and only a few days were left before the second evaluation. I had to add a real character instead of the capsule, and what could be better than the original character from Inside? So I took a frame from the game and analyzed it, and let's say I temporarily borrowed their character. That's when I discovered that its texture was just a single colored pixel. Honestly, excellent work, Playdead team. I added the character and some animations from Mixamo, started working on the camera switching concept, and added some effects like SSAO and SSR. And without realizing, I had a real prototype. The second evaluation went well, and for the first time felt a real progress. So I took a 2-day break, and during that time, I planned what I would do next. It's nice to have company, so you don't feel alone. Do you want to help me? Say hello. Procedural animations. I wasn't satisfied at all with the player movement. There was no sense of weight, no acceleration, no natural transitions. In the end, it was just animations playing as they were, without real interaction. The solution most companies use is motion matching. It's an advanced system that selects a specific animation in real time, based on player states and multiple conditions. Naturally, these kind of systems require a very large animation library to be convincing. The problem is that Unity is still far behind in this area. it doesn't have any built-in systems. So if you want a motion matching, you either have to implement it yourself from scratch or use a plugin. In both cases, you end up in a long try and error loop. And I didn't have the time, neither a proper animation library. So I had to find an alternative solution. But before that I had to create my own character. So I did that in Blender and Substance Painter and replaced the temporary one. Inverse kinematics. The basic idea of IK is that you modify animations after they're applied, which allows you to change movement itself. Unlike FK, it updates bone movement based on a specific target. IK is often used alongside motion matching to achieve a realistic result. I started studying it and understand it gradually, then made my first experiments on the feet. The workflow was simple. I cast a raycast from the feet and calculate the contact point with the ground. Then I apply the Y position to the foot, and for the foot rotation I convert the normal vector into a quaternion. After that I apply the values to the feet with an offset when needed. Finally I added a simple interpolation to smooth the movement. And this is the result. The player could now place their feet correctly, matching the ground beneath them. But I wasn't satisfied. There was still foot sliding, especially while rotating, making the player feet feel like they were floating. I could fix it with animations, but I thought why not use an IK again and create procedural footsteps. That means the footsteps themselves were driven by IK. I added this feature and enabled it only in specific states. For the steps, I defined a step height, multiplied it by speed and time, and added a sign timer. This made the movement resemble real stepping. And of course, offset and conditions were required so each foot steps independently and they don't lift at the same time. In the end, the result was more than satisfying. There's still improvement that can be made, but for now I had many other things to finish. Do you feel something strange when rotating? Like there's no momentum. I tested this myself and noticed that when we turn, especially at high speeds, we naturally lean our bodies to balance the center of gravity. So I simulated the same behavior. I calculated rotation speed, clumped and remapped it, and used the result to add slight rotation to the player's body. The results speak for itself. Now I can feel the player weight and momentum as if I were using motion matching, while in reality just a single animation. And I didn't stop there. I added procedural hand placement similar to Uncharted 4, as well as head movement to look at specific targets. The player now feels much more realistic and clearly interact with the environment around it, all achieved using procedural animations. Just look where we started and where we ended up. But unfortunately I didn't realize how much time this took. 2 full months had already passed, and I needed to focus on other things. All games of this type have some form of climbing, so this was the next on my list. I studied possible approaches. An IK was one option, which I tried, but after testing it was clear that this approach would take so much time. Time I didn't have, so I had to abandon it for now. Around the same time this game was released, and I was impressed by the climbing system, which relied heavily on physics. Luckily for me it was made in Unity, so I bought it and reverse engineered it to understand how it worked. I found that the developer used friction joint 2D and generally 2D physics even though the game is 3D, which is completely possible. For gripping you apply the sum of forces of the body reversed to the hand grip. I implemented the same thing and the result was excellent. Not this clip. The remaining challenge was transitioning back from climbing to normal movement, but I eventually solved it. Push system. I wanted to implement a box pushing mechanic, similar to Uncharted. I tried several physics-based approaches, but all of them failed. Then I remember a trick I used before to simulate suspension without a rigid body. Simply I cast multiple raycasts and subtract their value from each other to get pitch and yaw, and literally the entire physics script for the push system was under 10 lines, and worked so realistically. Then I added custom physics for the wheel to rotate correctly, some IK and conditions, and the push system was ready. Axe system. I really liked the hammer time mechanic in Little Nightmares, so it was essential for me to implement a similar mechanic in Leaf. I tried several physics and hinge joint approaches, but in the end I used the same trick as the push system. Unfortunately there was no animation for this system online, so I had to create them myself. I recorded myself using a stick like a crazy guy, then put the footage in Cascadeur and extracted the keyframes, cleaned and adjusted them, and did the same for all animations. In the end, I had a very similar system to Little Nightmares in a short amount of time. I also wanted to implement something similar to Rockstar Euphoria system. I did some research, but it turned out to be more complex than I expected. And at the same time, I really want something like it. So I created a lightweight system that dynamically switches between ragdoll and animation, which was more than enough for now. I didn't just copy mechanics from other games, I added my own as well. I created a destroyable TV mechanic using a throw system. And my favorite mechanic in Leave is inspired entirely by Tom and Jerry. Yep, hiding under the carpets and crawling. For some reasons, it's the one I loved the most. It allows you to move among enemies without being seen. In Little Nightmares, carpet exists and are interactive, but you can't do the same thing. This day was a sad one. Remember my little brothers? They lost their mother. I felt deep sadness and pain. It was an accident that could have been avoided, but it happened, so I couldn't continue and stopped there. But I had to keep going, so I decided to use the grief as a fuel to continue development. I changed the entire story to reflect how I felt. Time was running out, so I immediately started assembling the gameplay puzzle and connecting all the mechanics. I decided the game would start in a beautiful environment. I created a new mood, worked on the base layout of the map, replaced blockouts with varied assets, built the boy's house and designed his mother. At that point I took a risk and upgraded the project to Unity 6, which was still in development, because it offered features I needed. This came at the cost of physics stability. The entire Unity physics was broken again. All ragdolls and joint became unstable, and the most affected mechanic was climbing. I fixed what I could and keep moving forward. I started immediately working on cutscenes one by one to tell the story. At that time I had 1 month to finish the demo. I completed the cutscenes, but the world felt empty with no NPCs. So I quickly created multiple characters and wrote a simple AI code for them to move, perform actions and interact with each other and the player. Then the disaster struck. When I built the game and ran it, the entire PC froze. No error message, nothing. And strangely everything worked perfectly in the editor. I thought it was the end, especially with only weeks left. I pulled myself together and tracked down the issue. It turned out I had changed a for loop variable from local to global, and that variable was being used asynchronously elsewhere, causing an infinity loop. Thankfully it was resolved and I continued working. I added dynamic ground systems like snow and mud that can fully dirty the player. I added enemies, then moved to the sound. At this time there was no sound in the game at all, so I went through all scripts and added audio logic, like footsteps, ambient sounds and water sound. And speaking of water, I added underwater camera submersion and an interactive surface, but there was no time left to add swimming. I also faced challenges with timeline and Unity events. Working with them was a real nightmare. They only support one parameter, and every event required a separate signal. I left that for future me, and you'll see how I solved it later. But for now I had to finish the demo. I cleaned everything up and finished writing the game GDD in the final hours. Then the decisive day came. I presented the game and everything I worked on, and you couldn't believe the joy I felt when I learned that I didn't just pass, but that Leave was the best personal project presented overall. Everyone loved it, and I won the first place. I never expected that. Thanks to all my friends and everyone who supported me. I'm now officially a game developer, and from that moment it became clear that I had to continue developing Leave, no matter the cost. But the project's current state is disastrous, literally held together with duct tape, and performance is collapsing. I had to find solution to all the problems I faced, and that's where my real journey of developing Leave toward release it truly began. Everything you've seen so far was only the beginning of a long journey. I'll share it with you, and please follow along and add Leave to your wishlist on Steam and Epic Games.